All right. Episode 8. Hey guys, welcome back to the Complete Game, episode number 8. I'm your host, Curt Schilling, and he is Garrig Schilling. What's up, G?
Not much. What's going on, guys?
How are you?
Doing well. Doing
Good.
well.
I'm gonna let you look at the much more handsome Schilling. Um, we are we're gonna do a little different tonight. We're gonna want to talk about something in the media, something that was written on Tuesday. And then Garrick and I are we're gonna do some different things at the end. I'm gonna talk about
Little more free form, some
yeah,
question
a
and
little more
answer.
free form. And then we're gonna stick with the one person tonight, and that person is gonna be Frank Robinson. So, anyway, on Tuesday, a online product, The Athletic, for I'm sure a lot of you know what it is. You look at its staff, everybody that got fired from ESPN or left ESPN for the most part went to The Athletic, and there's some phenomenal writers, including Jason Stark there. Um, but a lady, Andrea Arcadapine, I hope I'm not butchering that, wrote an article, and it was how to fix Tanner Houck. And when I read it, she's a very good writer, but it's one of I think the things that you as fans don't get to see. I don't know if "get to see" is the right phrase, but when people who and I know this sounds condescending, I don't mean it that way. When people who haven't played the game try to tell people who are playing the game how to play the game, it generally doesn't mix. It doesn't go well. And this was one of those times as I'm reading it and I'm every line of the art, like I said, she's a good writer, but every paragraph of this article screamed no to me in so many different ways. The gist of the article, the meat of it was that Tanner Houck needs to change his pitch selection, um, which I couldn't disagree with more. Um, she did hit on this on one of the points I'm going to make here. He's struggling right now, and he's a guy who throws mid 90s. He's got a heavy sinker. He throws a four seamer. Problem number one. And there's other things going on. He developed a cutter. He's got 5 or 6 pitches and all the things. Uh, Something that has been true forever and that will always be true. There are maybe 10 pitchers in professional baseball all combined who have 5 or more pitches that actually execute and can throw 5 or more pitches in a competitive game and be competitive. All these new terms you're hearing, they're not new pitches. These are not new pitches. A sweeper is a flat curveball. A sweeper gets hammered. It's a flat curveball unless it's from a side armor. The splinker, the all these other things are just different ways to grip the baseball to throw the same pitch. But
This is an argument I've gotten in on social media. I've sent you stuff about where people are reinventing the sport, and there's the cleavered forkball or whatever this new name for it's the same pitch. It's a circle changeup that you're holding with your ring finger a little bit towards the
hey, you're
outside.
on camera.
It's ridiculous. Like the stuff I sent you, it's people trying to reinvent a 100-year-old game.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so I'm gonna use simple math in most of this because most of it is simple math. And the theory goes like this. And I had the command I had in my four seam fastball because I didn't throw a sinker. And the analogy is this: if I go to the bullpen and throw 1,000 pitches, and 500 are four seamer and 500 are sinkers, as opposed to 1,000 four seamers, what pitch am I going to have better control of? Am I going to be a four seam control guy, or am I going to be half and half with half and half? Because here's the thing about a sinker. So a sinker generally breaks to the arm side of the pitcher, and the exceptional ones, the ones that I can remember, Brandon Webb, Kevin Brown. Those are two of the most memorable ones for me. Their right-handed sinkers were almost like a left-handed power slider. They moved that much. Most guys' sinkers will sink like this. They'll sink from this much to this much, right? But at 95 miles an hour, it's pretty effective. The problem is when you're talking about hitting spots to get into somebody's holes in their swing, you can't rely on a sinker to be the same pitch every time. The four seamer, I know exactly where it's going to go and exactly what it's going to do when it crosses the plate because it doesn't move. It's straight. Now, you could argue that movement is better and all the things go with that, and Greg Maddox proved that. But that Johnny Padre session I talked about a couple episodes ago, that was exactly what happened to me. I was a sinker ball pitcher, and I threw a couple fastballs, and I'm throwing pretty hard. He's like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Why are you throwing a sinker?" And I said, "Well, because that's what I throw." He goes, "No, no, no, you throw too hard to throw a sinker." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, No, no, you're a fastball pitcher. You're a four seam guy now." And for the most part, I never threw another sinker again. Um, and it worked because that was the pitch that I perfected in a sense. I could throw a fastball, a 2-0 fastball, down and away on the outside corner against a fastball hitter for the most part, 9 times out of 10. And if I missed by a ball or I missed by a ball and a half. I didn't miss where the catcher was reaching to the other side of the plate. Like I said, a sinker is going to drop, but it's going to drop an inconsistent amount. And so I had all these charts, and I had a 9 square strike zone, 3 on top, 3 in the middle, 3 in the bottom, and I wanted to know which square I needed to throw to. Well, if you throw a sinker, it's going to start in one square and probably end up in another. That was no good for me. I had a marginal average slider. My split was good, but my split was never intended to be. I never threw a split in my life for a strike. I never tried to throw it for a strike. My curveball developed later in my career and became a decent fourth pitch. I never had. But here's the other thing. If I make 35 starts in a year, in a good year for me, 5 at most, I'll have all 4 pitches. At most, it's probably only going to be 3 or 4 at the most. But 5 would be the most I'd have all 4 of my pitches working.
When you're saying have as in have all four of
Lights
them
out.
as you want them.
All 4 are I can all 4
And
lights out.
what would you say percentage breakdown? Even if you have all four of them, are you using all four of them? It's probably still 80%, 90% fastball.
On a good night, I would be 75 plus percent fastball,
Yeah, see it's still
20% split with the breaking ball and the curveball and the slider. But Jim Palmer told me something one time, and I never forgot it, and it turned out to be true. He said, "The great pitcher is not the guy that goes out there with a great curveball and wins and dominates. The great pitcher is the guy that goes out there without his curveball and is still in the game when it shows up." Right? And so again, less than 5, and I can almost name in my head times the 17K game in Milwaukee, the no hitter that Ben Davis bunted to break up. That was still probably one of my most dominant nights ever. And you know it, right? You know those things. But 5 of those games, I'm going to be lights out. 5 of those games, I'm going to have nada. And
it's like it's like golf in that way being a pitcher. You're out there on your own on those nights, especially when you don't have your stuff. You have to be able to mistake manage and
right.
work until, like you just said, your curveball shows
To
up
give
or
you
whatever that pitch is.
one of those days, I was coming back from surgery, and I was warming up in the bullpen in San Francisco, and I noticed when I was warming up, the relievers were all like stretching, and I was like, "What the hell's going on?" And I was warming up and warming up and I didn't feel that great. I didn't feel that bad, but the relievers was all stretching. And Johnny Padres, who every start of my life when I left the bullpen, he was like, "Ah, you're ready to go, big boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah." He'd fire me up a little bit. We're walking to the dugout, and he looks at me, and goes, "Just do the best you can today, big man." And I was like, "What happened?" And it was I came out the first inning, no lie. I went 3 up, 3 down. I threw like an 84 mile an hour fastball, an 85 mile an hour fastball, and like an 86. Got 3 pop ups. Walked in the dugout, and Fergosi's looking at me like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "No, no, no reason." Came back out in the second inning, struck out 7 straight guys. And but coming, so 5 you're going to be phenomenal. 5 you're going to have trouble with. The other 25 you're going to mix and match. And when you're mixing and matching 3 pitches, or maybe 3.5, It's doable. When you're trying to mix and match and find six, first of all, that's crap. The guys don't have six pitches. Number one, because the catcher only has five fingers. But number two, because it's not physically possible to command six pitches. And again, you can command more than one, two or three. That's fine. But for the most part, nobody commands three pitches every single start, and rarely do they have all three. But this five, six pitch mixing. So anyway, the article goes into detail about him needing to mix his pitch sequences up, which I think has very little to do. My first takeaway is his command inside his strike zone is not good this year. And she actually mentioned that in the article, which I thought was very astute of her. But her remedy for opponents was stack the lineup with lefties. And because he's having trouble with lefties, which sinker ballers, right-hand sinker ballers generally do without a power sinker. The problem is that when so if you notice that a lot of the sabermetric stuff is now, especially with the three batter rule for relievers, the lineups, if you can switch them right, left, right, left, right, left. That's why switch hitters are so valuable, the good ones. Um, but if you give me four or five left-handers in a row, and left-handers hit me better than right-handers too. If you gave me four or five left-handers in a row, then I could find the pitches that I needed to get lefties out and get sharp with them faster. And I felt like it was a benefit to me. It might not have been, but I felt like it was. And a lot of times that's the margin for error that you need. So I don't think stacking the lineup is the solution against him. Talking about, and then she goes on to talk about, this is where it kind of separates. She's talking about locating his sinker. Now, and again, I use my 9-box strike zone. A sinker can be a 4-box pitch in the sense that it can go through 4 boxes in the sense of it sinking down and away. But again, you cannot consistently count on it being the same sinker, and it never is. And unless you have a monster sinker, and he throws hard enough, lose the sinker, dude. Lose it. You don't need it. Perfect the command of your fastball, and you'll be just fine because his split's a plus pitch. He's got a good slider, better than I ever had. And he can find mountains of success with just the four-seamer, especially pitching in Fenway. And, that would be my biggest thing. Because, again, when I go to the bullpen and I warm up, I usually threw between 55 and 72 pitches before a game, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I always charted all that stuff. But I would throw, if I threw 70 pitches, I would throw 45 to 50 fastballs, 10 splits, 3 or 4 sliders, 3 or 4 curveballs. I never worked in the bullpen differently than I was going to work in a game. Now, if I was struggling with my split and trying to find a feel, I'd work extra hard on that. But my ratios almost always stayed the same, which is what I teach young pitchers. Is when you go, it's like when you and I worked and you were younger and you were throwing, I would force you to go fastball in, fastball out before we started throwing breaking balls. Because if you don't throw those two, the other ones aren't going to be any good anyway. And again, another thing that Pods really hounded on me about was perfect 3 and you'll be fine. And the rare guy can get by with 2. There's a guy back in the 70s, his name was Mario Soto. He threw 2 pitches. He threw a fastball and a straight change. His straight change was so good he didn't need anything else. Excuse me. And
it's like going back to the golf analogy. Like if you, especially when you're starting to play golf, like you really do need 2, 3 clubs, 2, 3 pitches in your bag. And if you can hit those 3, you can at least play the game. And especially at the professional level when it comes to pitching.
But if you throw 95, if you throw 94, 95, you shouldn't be throwing both fastballs. It's a lose-lose. You can be a much more a much better pitcher. And he throws 63% first pitch strikes. So my guess is that I would guess that he's a 4-seamer early in the count. He has command of his 4-seamer, but he's just wild inside the strike zone. We talked about it the other day, right? He has command of the strike zone. He doesn't have control of the strike zone. And until I don't care how hard you throw. If the strike zone in the big leagues, you've got a strike zone and it's a square, right? It's this big by this big, but it's not. A hitter strike zone is this square, this square, this square, and this one. Those are the 4 you work in. You stay out of the other ones. And like I said, you can't count on a sinker staying out of those red hot boxes for hitters. Now Now, again, if you have a dominating Brandon Webb, Kevin Brown, I'm sure, oh my gosh, I just can't, Webb for the Giants. Uh,
Logan?
Logan Webb is a sinker ball pitcher. Great
Yep.
stadium to be a sinker ball pitcher into with the high grass, but uh, he's not a swing and miss guy. Now, I could turn any sinker ball pitcher in the game that throws 95 into a swing and miss pitcher if he lost his sinker. It's not that hard of a transition. It's just made tougher by the fact that guys and people, the analytics guys, are having a major impact on things that I don't think they should. Now, you can bring me recommendations. The problem is when you bring something to a pitcher, you're going to get in his head if he's not old enough and mature enough to understand and that's part of aging is understanding everybody's going to be trying to give you information when you're struggling. You got to know how to process it. What works for you, what doesn't. But Tanner Houck could be fixed in one start by dropping the sinker, going to a four seamer, and using his other stuff. He's that filthy. So, um, and then
Transitioning out of that Red Sox talk for a little bit, I was by Mookie Betts' house today, and it was making me think, uh, who would be a guy you played with that is like a Mookie Betts type, like could be a professional bowler or Deion Sanders, like a guy that, maybe not a professional, but could have played in college or could have played at a pro level somewhere else.
so I've played with a bunch of guys. The first guy that jumps out at me is Cal Ripken.
For
Cal Ripken had a basketball gym, almost like a parquet floor basketball gym in his house. And in the wintertime, he would have NBA players over at his house and we would play pickup hoops. And it was back in the day. Dudley Bradley, Steve Mix, guys that played for Washington and NBA guys, active NBA guys. To a man, every one of them said that Cal Ripken Jr. at the time could have started in the NBA that day.
It's usually those guys too that you'd expect. Like Cal Ripken Jr. played like however many games in a
Right.
row, and he was playing pickup in between because
Right.
those guys are just freaks that
Right.
love being
Yep.
playing
Yep.
sports.
Scott Rowland,
Like Mookie Betts, freak.
right. 300 bowler, like freak. But Scott Rowland was Mr. Basketball in Indiana, which is like
Oh yeah,
the
the yeah.
and he was going to Kentucky on a full ride.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and his apparently his game tape in high school, he touched his elbow to the rim of the hoop, which I didn't know was physically possible. So, yeah. But that leads me to thinking of a list, the five most athletic guys I ever played with in my mind. And I'm gonna miss some people. I play with so many guys, but the ones that jump out at me, and this is not necessarily in order, but these are the five guys who could have held their own, I think, in anywhere. Junior Spivey, second baseman for the Arizona Diamondbacks, one of the most amazing human beings I've ever known as a human. Uh,
Specimen.
Physical specimen, but a phenomenal athlete. His son Trey is a wide receiver at D1 college football, and I think his second son is following in his footsteps. Junior was as athletic as they come. Scott Rowland, uh, I don't know. He might be, if I had to pick one, he might be the most athletic. He was physically a specimen who ate McDonald's all the time and pissed everybody off. But there was nothing he could do. And I tell this story. So when he came up in '96, he got hurt and fell short of rookie status. So in '97, he was a rookie. The first game of his rookie season, he made what I still believe to this day is the best play of his entire career. Um, we were opening day, and Brett Butler was leading off for the Dodgers, a little left-handed slap hitter, slapped the ball down the third base line, eighth inning. Scott Rowland goes to and Scott Rowland, the thing about it is he had range at a position you don't have range at. Third base is a reactionary position. He had range at third base. Scott Rowland went across the bag into the foul territory, caught the ball over the bag, and is facing away from home plate and turns and throws underneath his hand to Rico, and it lands at Rico's chest. And Brett Butler was their leadoff hitter, fastest guy on the team by 5 steps. And it was one of those plays where it was almost like dead silence in the stadium, kind of like a oh. And I'm like, kind of like, wait, what did I just see? That would have been the web gem of the season on opening day. But just a phenomenal, phenomenal athlete. Um, Steve Finley, center fielder that I played with in Baltimore, and we got traded to Houston together, and then we came back together in Arizona. I still think is one of the probably top 5 to 10 best defensive center fielders that ever lived. To his dying breath, Steve will catch every ball he ever caught fundamentally with both hands. And I loved it. He could run. He had phenomenal
Every
first.
highlight of him you ever see, it's the same thing.
He had a phenomenal first step, and he was the guy who could see a ball, put his head down and run to the spot, and then stop and catch it.
Rare, you can tell a lot of guys if you like silhouetted them in their batting sense and stuff. Not a lot of guys when they're catching a fly ball, you can silhouette and know
Yep.
who they are.
Spectacular athlete and as good a center fielder as there ever was. Cal Ripken is on that list, obviously, for all the reasons I mentioned before. My number 5 is gonna put you off a little bit. Um, Fernando Valenzuela. Fernando Valenzuela, first of all, was a scratch golfer. Spectacular athlete. And he would routinely, in the old Veterans Stadium in batting practice, he would go upper deck in batting practice. Often, easily. Outstanding fielder, defended the position well, just a spectacular athlete. And physically you wouldn't look at it and think that, but he was, and he was quietly an assassin with his humor. Quiet guy, but he was. And another guy who was portly, exceptional athlete. He's not in my top 5, but he's up there. Is David Wells. Boomer was a phenomenal athlete. His mechanics, his delivery, able to repeat it, just consistent command. Um, and then two other. So this is my honorable mention list. These two guys, three of these guys on my list are on my. Were all in the same outfield at the same time. Brady Anderson and Mike Devereaux in Baltimore were unbelievable athletes. And we had Brady Anderson, Mike Devereaux, and Steve Finley in the outfield. And I remember it vividly because every batting practice, the game was who could take the most home runs away. And it was never 2-1. It was always like 8 to 5 to 5. And they were doing stuff over the fence. At the old Memorial Stadium, which had a like a 7-foot fence. All three of those guys, exceptional athletes, but I had Finn as probably the best. And um, last guy, and probably not. Again, I'm forgetting. I played with a guy in Arizona who's a pitcher who I love to death. One of the funniest guys I ever played with, Brian Anderson, left-handed pitcher. He was a he could have. I think he could have been at a high-level gymnast. He was a phenomenal athlete, tremendous body control, did a lot of things around the mound, like a Mike Hampton, who, excuse me, was a Gold Glover, exceptional Gold Glover, and defended his position as a ninth. Excuse me, as a ninth fielder. But so those are my lists, and I think what we'll do, Garrick, I think what we should probably do in the show in future shows is start coming up with lists like the top 10 first basemen I ever played with, top I played against, the 5 hitters I didn't like to see at the plate, things like that. I
Yeah,
think
I mean we've had these types of conversations forever, but another one we were talking about the other day was like if we could draft a full team
right.
that you and
Well,
I both
here's
take
what we'll
one that
do.
you've played against.
You and I will put together a draft of teams, and then we'll grab a baseball sim and run a season and see how they play against each other.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We'll draft
Yeah,
Scott, but it's got to be guys you played with.
guys I
So
played with. Yep, yep. So that will be, and that would actually that'll be a lot of fun. So I'm going to close out the show with my important person, and today it's Frank Robinson, and I'll for so many reasons. Let me just start off with his playing career. Still believe might be the most underrated Hall of Famer in the history of the game. I think a top five player of all time, maybe. And if he's not, he's 5.1. Won the MVP in both leagues, back-to-back years. Um, just one of the greatest players ever lived. Uh, I I came to the big leagues in 1988, and I was young and dumb and all the things that go with that. And he just wore me out. I was easy to wear out too because I was doing and saying a lot of dumb things. But I'll never forget, I got the call up in 1990 after, and I got called up in 89 again, but I got called up for good in 1990. And this was around the time of the Boz, and I had a Boz haircut, and I had an earring. Um, again, I'm not sure why, but I get to the clubhouse in Minnesota, and Frank Robinson calls me in his office, and I'm not exaggerating the time frame here. He calls me in and asks me to sit down. Now, it was always Mr. Robinson to me. I was raised in the game. I knew who he was, so I knew I was sitting across from greatness. And Frank says to me, well, he didn't say anything. So I sit down across, and it's a real small office in Minnesota, and he does this to me. He looks at me and just kind of nods his head, and I'm sitting there like this, and I'm not going to speak until he speaks. Probably about 3 or 4 minutes, nothing. But about every 30 seconds, he would look at me and tilt his head and go, and I was starting to sweat, like literally sweat, and he would just, and I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? How do I what? So finally, and literally like 3 minutes, he says, "You're not gonna throw a pitch for me until that thing's out of your ear and your hair looks respectable." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's all." I walked out of his office. I walked in the bathroom. I took the earring out, never put it in again, and I shaved my head. And he put me in the game that night. And I had a lifelong relationship with this man.
That the Boz will be the thumbnail for this episode, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had a baseball card in Rochester taken
Yeah, that'll be the thumbnail.
where
We'll
I
make
had
it
a
the thumbnail.
stripe in and I had it colored because
You're looking at it if you're watching on
yeah,
YouTube.
yeah, yeah. Not one memory I'm proud of, but he was good to me. Frank was amazing to me, and he didn't teach me a lot about pitching. He didn't teach me anything about pitching, but he taught me a lot about growing up and being just growing up. And every time I made an all-star team and ran into him at the all-star game or some other place, I was always he loved my wife. He was always good to my wife. His wife was always kind to me. His daughter was a phenomenal young lady. And I can remember a quick Frank Robinson story. We are in the 1990 season, and Mickey Tettleton's having a monster year, and all the things go with that. We're going from worst to first, and all this stuff. And Frank, when he managed, he didn't talk on the bench. So and in the American League, there wasn't a lot of player switching, right? But when he did something, he would look down the bench and he would point, and the guys on the bench would be like me, and he's like. He didn't say anything. He like no. Next guy would go me, whatever, and they would finally figure out who it was. So Phil Bradley was on the team, and Phil Bradley was on the disabled list, and it was his first night back. And Mickey Tettleton was on deck, and I can't remember. I don't know who got on first in front of him, but Frank leaned down and he pointed, and everybody's like me. Everybody's trying to guess. No, 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 no. And he's pointing and pointing, and finally he gets to Phil Bradley, and Phil goes like this, and he goes, "Yeah, you." Frank wanted Phil to go out and pinch run at first base. Bases are loaded. Mickey's coming up. Phil goes in and announces himself as the pinch hitter for Mickey Tettleton. Frank doesn't realize it until it's announced. And he's like freaking out. And Phil hits a grand slam. And after the game, it's the press conference is like, well, yeah, I wanted Phil to get into bat at a big time. And I'm like, oh my God. But that was Frank. And just an amazing, amazing man, and I'm forever thankful. And one of the things I remember most vividly is after the Glenn Davis trade to Houston, Pete Harnish, Steve Finley, and I got traded to Houston for Glenn Davis. Frank called me after the deal happened and said, "You're the one I didn't want to let go." And he might have done it to all three of us, but I never forgot that because he didn't have to do that, and it made me feel amazing. And he was good at things like that. So. Wherever you are up there, Frank, thank you. So anyway, hope you guys had a good Thursday. We will catch you guys back on Sunday.
Absolutely.
Garrett,
See
I
you
will
then.
let you sign on. Hold on, let me get you on camera this time. We're gonna get the production quality up here, but we're gonna have a two shot for the most of the show. Garrett, you can sign us off.
I was gonna say I'll be trying to step in and handle more of that so it looks a little smoother coming across. But also, if you have any questions you'd like answered or things you want us to talk about, please leave that in a comment or just let one of us
They
know on our
can't comment on
socials.
the YouTube because it's for children.
Facebook, whatever
Right.
you get us on. All right, just let us know. We're available and we want to talk about what you want to hear about.
Yep.
So, thanks for listening, guys.
Have a good night, guys.